So Illinois Statute 7-13, necessity, conduct which would otherwise be an offense, be a crime, be a wrong, is justifiable by reason of necessity if the accused was without blame in occasioning or developing the situation. So you can't be the person who's responsible for creating the thing you're trying to address. It can't have been your fault. Without blame in occasioning or developing the situation, and reasonably believed such conduct was necessary to avoid a public or private injury greater than the injury which might reasonably result from his own conduct. So you're walking down the sidewalk. It's a hot summer day. It's 90 degrees out. There's cars parked at the curb. You walked by a car and you happen to observe in the back seat is a baby in a baby seat, buckled in. All the doors are locked. The windows are rolled up. It's got to be 120 degrees inside that car in the sun on this hot day. If the baby stays in that car, it will die. So the doors are locked. So you break a window of the car so you can unlock the door, retrieve the baby from the car, save the baby's life. Is it wrong to break the window of the car in an absolute sense? Sure, you're not allowed to break windows in cars. That's not lawful. That's a harm, right? That's an injury to someone's property, criminal mischief. And normally you could be charged with a crime for that. And in this case, if you were charged with a crime for breaking the window, the legal defense you would raise is not self-defense, obviously. It would be the necessity defense. You'd be arguing, in effect, that the harm, the conduct, which would otherwise be an offense, is justifiable by means of necessity if the conduct was necessary to avoid a public or private injury greater than the breaking of the window. And clearly, we're avoiding the death of a human being. That's of greater value than is the breaking of the window or having refrained from breaking the window. Now, importantly, as it says here, it can't have been of necessity if you were to blame. So if you saw the baby in the backseat of the car, but the windows were rolled down and the doors were unlocked, and you rolled up the windows and locked the doors and slammed everything shut, and then broke the window to save the baby, you couldn't justify that breaking of the window as under the necessity doctrine because you created the need to do that. Straightforward enough. I'll mention in passing that in the 60s and 70s, a lot of states added another paragraph to this, and that is that the necessity cannot be purely a moral necessity. And this was added for a couple of reasons. One is there was a lot of destructive protests around nuclear power plants, sometimes military bases, more commonly nuclear power plants. People had been terrified by things like 3 Mile Island. They'd been made neurotic about the purported dangers of nuclear power plants, and they were climbing over fences and stuff when they were protesting and creating real risks and dangers themselves, and then trying to justify their conduct by saying, well, the necessity doctrine. Sure, I'm committing a crime by trespassing, climbing the fence, destroying property, but I'm doing it to avoid a much greater harm. The China syndrome, the meltdown of the plant to the core of the earth and destruction of the planet. I mean, that's not scientifically reasonable. And so specific language was inserted into many of these necessity doctrine statutes saying you can't be trying to justify actions that you're committing for a purely moral sense where there's not an immediate imminent imperative to act. And this also applied to in the abortion setting where people would say they bomb an abortion clinic and then they get caught and they try to justify it under necessity. Hey, sure, I bombed the building, but that's a smaller harm than all the abortions taking place inside the building. Nope, that doesn't work because you're not acting in the threat of an imminent moment, and it's a moral belief. Illinois doesn't have it in their necessity statute. Perhaps they have it in their case law. Who knows? But I just thought I'd mention that in passing. So this is the doctrine. This balancing test is the doctrine that you would apply, you would raise, the justification you would raise if you were charged with a criminal offense for using force against an animal, using force against a person, self-defense. By the way, the necessity defense would not apply to using force against a person because we have a self-defense body of law. That's specifically for that purpose. So justification of self-defense, those 5 elements of self-defense, if you've been charged with a crime for using force against a person, and the necessity justification defense, if you're charged with a crime for having used force against an animal. So that's how that works.